Thanks so much to all my patrons. Join now to help support the channel and help pick the books I review on this channel. Link in the description. And I am done. Okay, so I just got done listening to A Little Hatred. This is book 1 of the Age of Madness trilogy, which is the second of the First Law trilogies, written by Joe Abercrombie, and I want to give you my unedited thoughts about finishing this book, which was literally just right now. So, loved it. It's just my reread of it, and I think I loved it just as much the second time as I did the first one. I think when I read it the first time, my initial thought was that it is better than the start of the first trilogy, which was a really hot start. And I recently reread that whole trilogy. I've read the trilogy, I read the 3 standalones, and now I'm on to this final trilogy. And I ranked up the first book significantly on my reread, and I still feel the same way, that this one is superior to it in just about every way. There's so much that happens in this book, and that sets up the series in such a beautiful way. And looking back on the first one, the things that I loved about it was the characters, the general vibe of the story, the writing quality, but not so much the plot. The plot was relatively non-existent. I mean, sure, it existed, but in this one, it is a very fast-moving, wonderful plot that really sets up these pieces in such a wonderful way. I think it's so fun to get to see this next generation in this First Law universe. Oftentimes you see when the series can be done where they enter in a new era. And oftentimes what the authors will do is they will either move way past the previous era and go into totally different characters, a la something like Mistborn, or they will bring in a bunch of the old characters, and like Red Rising or something, where they move on in time, but really just rehashing Darrow and then bringing some others, but it's centered around Darrow. But in this one, it did a really, really good job at putting the focus on the new characters, but keeping those old ones around to give this flavor to it, and really, metaphorically, pass the torch on to these younger ones, while still very much being within the source material. And it's just great. Just quick thoughts before we go too much further into it, but I found that, just as always, the audiobook narration here blew me away. In fact, I'm more impressed by this book than I was even in the previous ones. There's just so many wonderful things to appreciate about the subtleties that Stephen Pacey's able to bring out here. In my mind, and a lot of people's mind, it's the greatest audiobook narration of a fantasy series of all time, by a decent margin. I think that there's some others that come close. Jeff Hayes with Dungeon Crawler Carl, the Michael Page with the Gentleman Bastards series. But this one, not only are the voices wonderful, but they play off each other in such a great way. I mean, you can hear characters aging throughout these books, which is crazy. You can hear characters that are related sound similar to their relatives. I mean, just the vocal range on Stephen Pacey, it's so impressive. I mean, I find myself sometimes when I read an author that really speaks to me, somebody like a Steven Erikson, or quite frankly, like a Joe Abercrombie, to make me sit back and go, wow, that is so far beyond anything that I thought conceivable, that it makes me immensely happy. And this is one of the only audiobook narrations where I think the same thing, where it's like, you are so far above the level that I would ever come to expect out of somebody in this craft. It's just truly great. Far better than the previous ones, which were great on their own right. It also brings to mind this idea, as I was talking to some people in my Discord about, can you start with this series, instead of reading all the First Law books before it? And I think the answer is, I think a controversial answer is yes, you most certainly can. In fact, as I was reading this, because I went over this question before I was reading this, and some people mentioned that they might be doing that. And I thought about it as I was reading this, would it make sense? And you would lose out on a fair amount of the backstory on some of the characters, and especially that older generation. But you would also gain this wonderful sense of mystery that you don't have, and that going back and reading the backstory of these characters that you've already learned a little bit about in this series would be a really fun thing on its own right. So it could be a really good way to do it. I don't know if it'd be better, but certainly doable, and potentially extremely enjoyable. So yeah, I'm not one of those people that's going to claim like that's certainly not something that's possible, because it very much is. I also found that this book had a better overall cast than the original trilogy, but as the average grade I would give every character is higher than the average grade than I gave the characters in the first series, nobody really stands out like 𝐒𝐲, where you're just like, yep, that's the best character. You just get a bunch of people that are really wonderfully done, and I don't know if that's better or worse, because certainly I will always cherish having people like 𝐒𝐲, or somebody like a Logan Nine Fingers in that first series that really stood out as central characters. But to have every character be pretty much equally enjoyable and well written was a wonderful treat. It's also absolutely a joy to reread this book, even more than the previous ones, because you get to see all of these amazing dominoes being set up. And knowing how this beautiful tapestry is going to fall down is so great. And in fact, especially in this first one, I imagine I might feel similarly in the next two books as I read them, but there's so much going on here that is going to, spell out what's going to be happening further on in this series, that it's really cool to be able to be involved in this read along as I'm going through this. Now, let's break down the different aspects of this book and that makes it truly great. But before that, let's take a very quick break to talk about something quite personal to me. So, as you've likely seen on my channel in the past, sometimes I collaborate with different companies who sponsor my videos. But what you don't see is that for every company that reaches out to me, there's half a dozen, maybe even a full dozen, that are extremely elaborate phishing scams or some other type of scam that take a ridiculous amount of time for me to figure out if they're legitimate or not. And honestly, I'm pretty sure that I've fell for a few of them. And I'm really tech savvy. I mean, I put all these videos together myself. I've learned all the tech involved with it. I was born with the internet. I get this kind of thing, but these scammers are good. And it's made me kind of shy away from doing some ads, which kind of sucks, and it's been rather demoralizing. Which makes the company I'm collaborating with on this video, NordVPN, a lifesaver personally to me, because they've solved that problem for me. I now use NordVPN all the time on all of my devices. This is not hyperbole. And I know what you're thinking, and you're like, huh? That doesn't make sense. It's just a VPN. How can that protect me from phishing attacks and other scams? Well, if you haven't looked at NordVPN in a while, it's got some new tricks. Now, along with the tricks that it has that a lot of VPNs have, where you can pick an IP from anywhere pretty much in the world and be able to simulate that you're there, it has some other wonderful things as well. Most notably, the threat protection, which is what I've needed. So not only is it fast and it hides your IP, but now you can go into the app and turn on web and file protection. So when I try to go to a malicious website or respond to somebody that might be trying to trick me, it literally won't let me do that. It'll block it forever. Now, obviously, I could override that if it made a mistake, but thus far, and I've been using it for a while, it hasn't made any mistakes. Now, if you want to try it out, check out nordvpn.com/mfbr, short for Matt's Fantasy Book Reviews. You can get a 2-year plan plus 4 months free, and it's risk-free with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So, all right, let's go back to the book. Let us start talking about the plot. So I can't say too much because I don't want to ruin anything for you, but I can talk some general themes here that'll tell you a little bit about what this is about. So there's two competing storylines here. Now, there's some others going on, but I think it all boils down to the two, and there's some other subplots that are going on within those. But the two plots, one of them is focused in 𝐴𝑑𝑢a, which is the main city in the center of the world that was the hub of the first trilogy. And this population is undergoing, for a multitude of reasons that we go into as this book goes along, but they're involved in some major social unrest. Now, the other storyline is taking place in England. Now, England is up in the north, And it is essentially I don't think this is the right term, but it's like a colony of 𝐒𝐴dua. And it's in a different kind of continent, but it's right on the other side of the coast, and they control it. Now, the North, these wildlanders that are up north, the traditional kind of like Viking type characters or the wild men, they're constantly at battle trying to take over England, which used to belong to them. Now, in England, which is a protectorate of 𝐒𝐴dua, there's this new war hero that's being swept up into a leadership role and becoming dangerously famous. And if you know anything about history, you know what would happen if you get a general that is immensely powerful, especially in olden times when they might decide to take over. That doesn't happen in this book, but you get the sense that something is brewing here. Now, there's these major like French Revolution vibes with a huge social revolution and heavy usage of public executions, as well as an industrial revolution kind of hybrid going on here. And the industrial revolution thing is kind of propelling this social revolution because people are being displaced out of their jobs. This new machinery is making it possible for less people to have to get paid by employers, and there is revolt going on. And very early on in this book, a revolt happens, and you'll have to read to find out exactly what happens there. So that's the general plot. It's a wonderful, wonderful plot. And obviously there's things going on here where you're going to have to wait till books 2 and 3 to figure out what's going on. But there's a lot of resolution to some of these subplots and just teasing out what's going to go on in the future that makes the plot on its own in this first book, which is not always true, even for great books, truly, truly great. Now, the world building here. I found the world building to be just as great as the previous ones, although rather limited in scope, but all of the first laws kind of are. Now, I'm obsessed with the world here. I can't stop thinking about it, even when I'm done with the books. It's just very well built out. Now, part of that is I find the maps to be wonderful, although they're all unofficial maps. Abercrombie's never made one, but they're very well done. They've got to have been made in collaboration with this guy. I'm guessing, maybe not. I guess I don't know if they've got to be, but they're very well done. And I find everything just has this rich culture to it that makes the world just, amazing to me. The fantasy elements here, which is by far the weakest part of this story, are almost non-existent. Now, it's a made-up place, made-up characters. And by the purest definition, this is fantasy because it's not real. But there's no magic going on here. There's no dragons. There's no, any of the typical things that you would see in 95% of the fantasy books that you're going to be able to, that you read about. Even the first trilogy, which had some magic in it. It had some characters acting in this, I don't want to ruin anything for you, but a character in particular that's got something crazy going on with him, and some alternate personality stuff going down with a very, very heavy fantasy element to it. But there's really none of that going on here. There's, the only thing you could describe is this one character, Rika, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. She's got this thing called the long eye, which every now and then she goes into this fit, like a seizure kind of thing, and when she comes out of it, she has a dream, and she describes the dream, and it's kind of confusing about what the dream means, but it pretends something in the future. But I think, as I'm thinking about it, that's the only fantasy element really distinctly here that you would think of from kind of any other fantasy book. So speaking of Rika, let's talk about the characters. So first POV character, there's 7 of them, I'll talk about Rika, and she is the Dogman's daughter. The Dogman, a POV character from the first trilogy, and this is going to become a theme here, because next you have Crown Prince Orso. This is 𝐤𝐴l's son. 𝐤𝐴l, I don't want to ruin who 𝐤𝐴l is in case you haven't read the first trilogy, but he is a very important character, and Orso is his son that we did not meet in the first trilogy either. Then you have Savine Dan-Glokta. This is San Dan-Glokta's daughter. You've got Vic Dan Teufel. So let me go back to Savine. Savine's wonderful. She's such a great character. But she has a lot of the traits that Glokta has of just being ruthless. But she's turned her passion into making money. She wants to invest in companies, kind of strong-arm them, not really doing anything really illegal, but definitely trying to accumulate power and wealth. And it's really fun to see her use her father's skills and apply them in a less malicious way, still kind of evil, but less maliciously than straight up torturing people, which is what Sand was famous for. Then you got Wych den Teufel. This is Sepp den Teufel's daughter, who's a member of the Inquisition. That gives a deeper look into things that involving Savine and Sand-en-Glocta and aspects of that. Then you've got Leo Dan Brock. This is Finrey and Herod's son. This is the character who is the military general from England, who's increasing his reputation. The young lion, they call him. And then you've got a couple new characters that aren't involved with anybody in the past story, and one of them is called Gunnar Broad. He is a character that fought in the wars in the first book. That is a character that has come back and is trying to do the right thing, which is a central theme for this whole story, is characters trying to do the right thing and really never really being able to do it. But Gunnar has this vicious streak to him that he needed when he was fighting in the military. Now he's trying to live a normal life with his family, but he keeps getting pulled into doing bad things. And then you've got Jonas Clover, and this is the character that's going to give you the point of view from the north with the wild men in the far north. And he's a character that I don't think we met in the first trilogy, but he gives a good perspective into a lot of characters that we did know from the original trilogy. So those are the characters. They are awesome. Talked about them a bit before, but every single one of them is great. Every time they flip to a new character, I'm not upset in the slightest, because I know that I'm just going to get some awesome writing. The prose is maybe the best thing about this story, aside from the characters. It's just great. It's truly great. Now, I often say that, prose is subjective, and what might be good prose from one person's perspective is poor to another. Even with things that are considered wonderful prose, you might find some people that think it's overdone. I can't imagine somebody thinking the prose in this First Lost story is anything other than excellent, because it doesn't try to be this like purple prose. It's just very witty, extremely well done, makes you think, makes you laugh. It's really maybe like the most perfect prose out there for what I'm looking at as a reader. Now, I find some other stuff to be a little bit better. Things like Malazan I find to be a different tier with what the themes that they're able to bring through their writing. Stephen Erickson, E.N.S. Summers is good as well, but he's not on that Stephen Erickson level. But yeah, prose, wonderful. And then who do I recommend this story to? So I truly think I recommend this story to literally everybody that is okay with a darker story. This is going to be a grimdark book, even though Abercrombie will tell you that it's not. It is. There's a lack of hope here. There's a very dark tone to it. You just get the sense that everybody's kind of bad. But not in the evil sense. They all have good motivations. They make sense, which is the greatest kind of bad character to me. When you get it, you don't agree, but you get it. But yeah, wonderful, wonderful characters. But if you don't like things with a darker tone, if you don't like these morally gray kind of characters, if you kind of like more of it's kind of almost like the antithesis of something like a Brandon Sanderson, who writes these kind of more black and white characters. The good guys are going to win. It's this epic kind of feel-good sort of theme to it. And I'm not dissing on Sanderson. I love Sanderson. I love reading those kind of things, but I also love this. But if you only love that, and you don't love anything like this, you're not going to like this. But for everybody else, yeah. If you're wanting to start the series, I do still recommend that you go back and read the initial trilogy, but you don't have to. If this one's appealing to you more, check this one out. And if you've read the first trilogy, and a lot of people have done this, and for whatever reason didn't make it to these books, you messed up. You messed up, but you can still fix it by reading these. And I find some other people that are like reading the standalones, and they're like, I wasn't feeling them, maybe I'm done with the series. No. Because this takes everything that you loved about the first one and just injects a little bit more into it in just the perfect way. So yeah, truly, truly wonderful, perfect first book to a trilogy. And I really, really cannot wait to keep going with my journey rereading these books. So that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching this review. And as always, happy reading to you. Thanks again to all of my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier and Librarian tier patrons: Anna G, CJ, Doust, Darren, Gil, Gregory, JD, Jonathan, Nathan T, Nev's Book Channel, 𝗿𝘅𝑜doxia, Ron Reich, Russell, Ryan L, Sydney Baker, Tay C, Tahir, Tommy, Zion, Anna, Andra, Blair, Brock, Evan, Joe UK, Kat Mick, Michael Sugarman, Philippe, Sky, and Wacky. Thanks for sticking to the end of this video, and if you want to watch some more content from my channel, click over here and I've got some good videos for you. Thanks so much.